Well, hi to our Fargo Baptist Church family, and welcome to today's segment of While We're Apart. I'd like to talk to you today about not fearing. Of course, that's easier said than done because we all fear. In fact, they asked Ann Landers, and many of you would remember Ann Landers from years ago. She was an advice columnist and always giving people advice on various things. I mean, hundreds of subjects, thousands of subjects. And they asked her once, what do you find to be the biggest hang-up with folks? What do they ask counsel for more than anything else? And she said, oh, hands down, without any question, it's fear. How to overcome fear. She said people have fears, and the vast majority of the mail that came in for her was on how to deal with fear. You know, in the ministry, there are a lot of things to fret about, and in life, there are a lot of things to fret about, and that all spells up to something that's going to tax you and wear you out and even wear down your health. Now, in the Bible, we find here in Psalm 37, verse 1 just says, fret not. Fret not. Verse number 7 says, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Fret not thyself. And then the last part of verse 8 says, fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. Now that's easier said than done, isn't it? I was up fishing with a pastor friend of mine in Canada some years ago, and we were at the bait shop, and there was this plaque on the wall with Billy Bass. It was a fake bass fish there on the wall, and if you press this little red button, it would flap its tail and start singing this little tune, Don't Worry, Be Happy. And of course we'd giggle about that. It just sounds so easy, doesn't it? Don't worry, be happy. And yet we find 366 admonitions in the Bible not to worry. So there's one for every day of the year, and then even one extra one for leap year. 366 times we're told not to worry. We are living in a day and age of worry, and I think it's part of the last days. You know, the events that take place and make the news and so on really shouldn't surprise us, because in Luke chapter 21, Jesus said that in the last days, men's hearts will be failing them for fear and for looking upon those things which are coming upon the earth. I mean, there are going to be a lot of things coming down in the last days. And I've said many times from the pulpit of Fargo Baptist Church here, I believe we're not just in the last days, but we're in the end times of the last days. And I think this thing is really winding down. And so how can we fret not in these last days? And the Bible tells us not to. Well, that word fret, it's kind of a funny word. It's not something we use a lot, at least in this day and age. If you think of a fret and you play guitar or banjo, you're thinking of that line there on the neck of the instrument that you know helps you strike up a certain chord. It's a fret. Or if you write music, you know that there are frets found there in stanzas and choruses and things along those lines. But to the average person, to fret or to fear, it's a very real thing. It's not an occasional thing. It's not something they do monthly or weekly, but definitely, for the most part, daily, and in some cases, continually. Now, have you ever wondered why God created such an emotion? I mean, if we're told to fret not here, why is it that God put the ability for us to even fret? He wired us with the wherewithal to fret. Well, there are a number of things like that, emotions or things that God placed within us that really serve a good purpose. I mean, we're told in the same time not to get angry and let not the sun go down upon our wrath. And yet, why did God put that emotion of anger within us if we're not supposed to get angry? We can talk about a lot of good things turn bad. I mean, food, for example. God requires for us to eat food, and yet we can overdo it in that area. God has given to mankind intimacy, and yet we know how bad that's been perverted. And we could talk about money, for example. You know, money's a good thing and a needful thing, but somebody can get covetous and greedy over it and things along those lines. We need sleep, for an example, and yet we can overdo it or we can underdo it when it comes to sleep. Well, fear is kind of like that. It's kind of like the reason we have nerve endings in our fingers. I mean, if you kept hitting your thumb with a hammer and there were no nerve endings in it, you'd never know that you're doing some damage to yourselves. Or if you did not have nerve endings in your finger and you were touching the hot stove, you wouldn't know to remove your hand before some damage was done. So the nerve endings are a good thing, and so it is with fearing or fretting. Now, we might wish at times that we didn't have such emotions, but really we need fear. It can keep us out of trouble. A young person's fear of their parents can keep them from overly acting up, or even the fear of God can be a good thing, or the fear of a Christless eternity, departing from this world without being ready, can lead to salvation. So these can be a good thing, but when it comes to fear, it can be a blessing or it can be a blight. It can really plague you and really mar your own emotional stability. If there's ever been a time where you just couldn't stop thinking about something or fearing something, then really fear is over the top in your life and you need to get victory on it. If you ever have been living through dread and you just couldn't turn it off, that's not a good thing. God has given us the emotion of fear, and maybe you have some fears today. But the question is how to get the cure for the fear, how to get some control over the fear. And if you'll join me tomorrow morning, we'll pick up with this subject as we talk about fret not.